Hello. Thank you for taking time for yourself again and joining me here. Let's search together today for where our strengths lie hidden. You and I have lived long, full lives, accumulating wisdom and experience that younger generations can only dream of. We've seen the world change, watched children and grandchildren grow up, learn to appreciate simple joys, and endure hardships steadfastly. It would seem, what more is there for us to fear? We've overcome so much already. But have you noticed that right now, with 75 or even more years behind us, new anxieties, unfamiliar before, seem to appear out of nowhere? Like quiet, uninvited guests settling in our souls, sometimes hindering our ability to enjoy the day. These aren't the fears of youth, the fear of not having enough time, not achieving enough, making mistakes. No, these are different. They're connected to our bodies, which are no longer as cooperative as they once were, to our place in a rapidly changing world. And sometimes they touch upon things that feel awkward to even speak of, things we might even feel ashamed to admit to ourselves. Today, I want to talk with you about exactly that, about 3 such fears that often arise after 75, and especially about one, the one that many of us hide deep inside. I don't promise magic pills, but I do promise you understanding, empathy, and the reassurance that you are not alone. Perhaps simply by talking about this, by naming these fears, we might feel a little lighter. Let's try to understand this together. Stay with me. The first such uninvited guest, often creeping up unnoticed, is the fear of sudden frailty, of losing independence. Not a gradual decline, which we prepare for in one way or another, but specifically a sharp change, a fall, a broken hip, and suddenly you're bedridden. Or a stroke happens, and you can no longer care for yourself, becoming dependent on others. This fear hangs over us like the sword of Damocles, especially if we live alone. Let me tell you about Arthur. Arthur, 78, had always been a very active and independent man. He worked his whole life at a factory, then in retirement, he tended his garden plot, went shopping himself, and took the bus for errands. He prided himself on being dependent on no one. But one winter, he slipped right near his building entrance. He didn't fall hard, just got a bruise, but the incident shook him to his core. He suddenly clearly imagined what could have happened. What if he had broken his leg? Who would have helped him? How would he manage? This thought frightened him so much that he became afraid to leave the house, especially in bad weather. He started refusing trips to the garden plot, asking a neighbor to buy bread for him. His world began to shrink. He didn't speak about it aloud, but a constant, draining fear settled inside him. He felt as if he were walking on thin ice that could crack at any moment. He was ashamed of this caution. He was angry at himself for having been brave before and now fearing every step. He felt this fear robbing him of life's last joys, but he couldn't do anything about it. This fear of suddenly becoming a burden, of losing control over his life. It was almost unbearable for Arthur. Arthur lived with this anxiety for a long time, until one day he opened up to an old friend, his contemporary, and he was surprised to hear that his friend experienced similar concerns. The simple realization that he wasn't the only coward brought immense relief. They started walking together, first around the block, then a bit further. Supporting each other arm in arm, they felt more confident. On his friend's advice, Arthur installed a grab bar in the bathroom and bought a cane with a stable tip. Not because he couldn't walk without it yet, but just in case, for confidence on slippery roads. He understood something important. Acknowledging the risk doesn't mean surrendering to fear. It means accepting the new reality and adapting to it sensibly. Because physiologically, yes, our bones become more brittle, our reactions slow down. That's a fact. But psychologically, we can either allow fear to paralyze us, locking us within 4 walls, or we can take sensible precautions and continue living as fully as possible. Instead of imagining the terrible consequences of a fall, Arthur started thinking about how to avoid it. He no longer felt like he was walking on thin ice. Rather, he was learning to walk on it carefully, knowing where the ice was thicker and where it was better to go around. He started going to his garden plot again, though not as often, and asked his son for help with heavy work. He didn't regain his former recklessness, but he regained the joy of movement and a sense of control, not over everything in the world, but over his life within reasonable limits. Maybe small changes in your home, removing rugs you could trip on, improving lighting, installing grab bars, or using a cane could give you confidence too. Maybe it's worth talking about these fears with loved ones or friends. Acknowledging fear is the first step towards stopping it from controlling you. Remember, caution is wisdom, not cowardice. But the body is one thing. What about our soul, our sense of being needed in this rapidly changing world? Because often, along with the fear of physical weakness, comes another, no less tormenting fear. The fear of becoming invisible, unneeded, of losing connection with the world and loved ones. We see how technology changes, how differently young people live and communicate. Sometimes it seems our stories, our experiences, are no longer interesting to anyone. Children and grandchildren pop in for a minute, busy with their own affairs, and it feels like we've been left somewhere on the sidelines of their lives. I want to tell you about Eleonora. She's 76. Eleonora was always the heart of the family. Everyone gathered at her place for holidays. They called her to share news, to ask for advice. But over time, she began to notice that the calls became less frequent, the visits shorter. Her grandchildren spent more time on their phones than talking to her. When she tried to share something from her youth, she felt they listened out of politeness. She started to feel superfluous, like old furniture everyone is used to but no longer notices. She saw her grandchildren discussing things on their gadgets, laughing at jokes she didn't understand, talking about things she knew nothing about. And she felt bitter and lonely, even when everyone was nearby. This fear of being misunderstood, uninteresting, forgotten, gnawed at her from the inside. She compared herself to a wilting flower, still in the vase, but no longer commanding attention. She felt hurt and sad, but she remained silent, not wanting to seem intrusive or complain. She would just quietly retreat to her room, feeling an invisible wall growing between her and her loved ones. Eleonora felt sad for a long time, until one day her teenage great-granddaughter asked for her help, with darning jeans. It turned out that patches and visible stitches were fashionable now, and Eleonora, who had been an excellent seamstress and knitter all her life, suddenly felt needed. She not only helped her great-granddaughter, but also showed her different types of stitches and explained how to choose thread. The girl was thrilled, and Eleonora realized her skills and knowledge could still be valuable. She just needed to find a new application for them. She stopped waiting to be entertained or asked questions. She started taking the initiative herself. She asked her grandson to show her how to use a tablet, at least for video calls and viewing photos. It was difficult at first. She kept getting confused, but gradually she got the hang of it. She started writing down her recipes, which everyone had always loved, and gave a beautifully decorated notebook to her daughter. She began telling not just stories from the past, but those that could teach her grandchildren something, about resilience, about love, about overcoming difficulties. She understood that connection with the world isn't a one-way street. You don't have to wait for the world to come to you. Sometimes you need to take a step towards it yourself. Physiologically, we might not be as fast or energetic, but our inner world, our experience, that's a treasure. Psychologically, it's important not to withdraw into resentment over lack of attention, but to seek new ways of interacting. Instead of feeling like a wilting flower, Eleonora became more like a wise gardener who knows which seeds to plant, when and how to care for them so they bear fruit. Think about what skills, knowledge, or stories of yours might be interesting or useful to others. Maybe it's worth trying to master some simple modern technology to stay connected, or find an activity you enjoy, a club, an interest group, volunteering, where you can meet like-minded people and feel valued. Your life goes on, and you can still be an active participant in it. And yet, even when we find our place alongside loved ones, when we overcome the fear of physical frailty, there is another anxiety, perhaps the deepest, the most intimate one. The one that's terrifying, not just to talk about, but even to think about. The one that can cause agonizing shame. This is the fear of losing mental clarity. The fear of what's called dementia. The fear of forgetting loved ones' names, getting lost in a familiar place, ceasing to understand what's happening around you. This fear is particularly potent because it touches the very core of our identity, our self. We fear not just becoming physically helpless, we fear losing ourselves. Listen to David's story. David turned 80. He had always prided himself on his memory and sharp mind, read a lot, solved crosswords. But lately, he started noticing odd things in himself, forgetting why he entered a room, struggling to recall the name of a neighbor he'd known for years, asking the same question several times in an evening. Each such instance triggered a panic attack in him. He told no one. He was terribly ashamed. He thought, "That's it, it's starting. I'm losing my mind." He began avoiding social interaction, afraid someone would notice his memory lapses. He stopped going to his history club because he feared he wouldn't be able to keep up the conversation or would forget a name or date. He felt as if a ticking time bomb was inside him, and he didn't know when it would explode. This fear was dark, sticky. It poisoned his life. He constantly tested himself. Do I remember this? Do I remember that? Any forgetfulness was perceived as a catastrophe, confirmation of his worst fears. He felt like a traitor. His own memory was betraying him. And the shame, the burning shame for this weakness, prevented him from asking for help or even talking to someone. David lived in this nightmare for several months until his wife, noticing his depression and withdrawal, prompted him into an honest conversation. With immense difficulty, stuttering and blushing, he confessed his fears to her. And do you know what she did? She wasn't scared. She didn't start wailing. She simply hugged him and said, "Dear, we'll face this together. Besides, forgetfulness at our age isn't always a catastrophe." They went to the doctor together. The doctor conducted tests, talked with David, and explained that minor memory issues at his age are often a normal phenomenon related to aging, not necessarily a sign of dementia. There's a difference between forgetting where you put your keys and forgetting what keys are for. The doctor gave him recommendations: maintain mental activity, reading, puzzles, learning something new, socialize more, eat properly, get fresh air. The most important thing David gained from this visit was the lifting of the stigma, the removal of that terrible shame. He realized he wasn't alone, that it was a problem many face, and that it could and should be worked on. He stopped hiding. Yes, he still forgot things sometimes, but he no longer saw it as the end of the world. He could laugh at himself, ask his wife to remind him of something. He returned to his club. He understood that his identity was much more than just flawless memory. It was his experience, his feelings, his relationships with people. Physiologically, the brain changes with age, but it has amazing plasticity. Psychologically, lifting the burden of shame and fear frees up enormous resources. Instead of living with a ticking bomb, David felt he had simply moved into a different stage of life, one with its own characteristics, but still with room for joy, connection, and meaning. If you notice memory problems in yourself, don't panic and don't feel ashamed. Talk to a doctor to understand the cause. Remember that minor forgetfulness isn't a verdict. Maintain mental and physical activity, socialize, and most importantly, be kinder to yourself. You are not just your memory. You are your entire life. So, these are the new fears that can arrive after 75. The fear of sudden frailty, the fear of becoming invisible, the fear of losing mental clarity. They are real, and experiencing them is not shameful, but humanly understandable. We live in a world that values youth, strength, speed, and it can be difficult for us to accept our age-related changes and the anxieties associated with them. But I want you to remember, your life has not become less valuable. Your experience, your wisdom, your capacity for love and empathy, all of that is still with you. These fears are just shadows that seem larger in the twilight. But when we bring them into the light, talk about them, share them with those we trust, they often diminish, losing their power over us. You have walked such a long, often very difficult path. You possess incredible inner strength, even if it doesn't feel that way right now. Don't let fears steal the joy of today. Accept yourself, with all the changes, with all the anxieties. Seek support. Share your feelings. Take small steps to feel more confident and needed. Your life is valuable, your experience is priceless, and your feelings matter. Be kind to yourself. You've earned it. Thank you for being with me today. Take care, and until next time.